A lot of white guitar players will cite Beck and Clapton and yourself, the great guitar triumvirate in the 60s and 70s as major influences. But he seems to think that you were sort of a bit different in your approach to the blues, different from Clapton and Beck, that is. He cites the example of Drinking Muddy Waters from the Little Dreams.
Drinking Muddy Water, yeah.
Drinking Muddy Water from
which is, as he's saying, is rolling and tumbling roots, but just in so much as that is Howling Wolf's Meet Me in the Bottom, is also, Howling Wolf, it's called Meet Me in the Bottom, is also, there's just as many... The
point there is that you seem to, that seemed to break new ground.
It probably did.
Drinking Muddy Water.
Well, it probably did. In those days, yeah, that's right. Once, I was actually recording stuff that I was being involved in writing, yeah. But I think even, with Zeppelin, our approach to the blues was, even, it wasn't just leaning on the traditional sort of emulating what there was before. It was taking it onwards into another dimension. Yeah.
But thinking back in retrospect, what do you think you did to the blues?
Purely what I just said then, just taking it into another dimension.
That dimension being?
Something that hadn't been done before.
You just made it louder and harder? Or
no, I wouldn't say louder. Maybe more intense. I wouldn't say louder, because the whole thing about Zeppelin was that it could be, like thunder one moment and like a whisper the next within the same song. Light and shade.
I see. Okay.
So maybe more light and shade.
Perspective.
Certainly, and the dramatic quality as well.
So, do you think you were more flexible with the blues than, say, Clapton and Beck were, whereas they tended to put it up on a pedestal and deify the musicians?
For a start, you see Eric, especially in the days of John Mayall, where he actually made his reputation as a blues player, was actually digesting all these different players like Freddie King, B.B. King, etc., 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 and actually playing those phrases, linking them all up together. Whereas I was more intent in coming up with my own phrasing for blues and my own approach to playing it, just in the same way as with the riffs. I always came up with original riffs purely through, just searching.
Do you think that those, like Clapton...
But they put them on the pedestal.
Yeah. Whereas you were a little more flexible, you thought, well, it's just one style, and you sort of used that as your, as one medium.
Well, you see, wait a minute. I think Eric certainly did. I don't know whether Jeff did, because my roots weren't, and neither were Eric's or Jeff's, just blues. Even though Eric, made that his niche, so to speak. My roots went back to the early rock and roll. You see, and everything that was guitar orientated anyway, as did Jeff's. So, yeah, my interest basically was in the guitar as an instrument with 6 strings and what could be done with it. And that just didn't include just playing blues or just playing rock and roll. It included playing, acoustic music and, you know what I've done, so. Good.
During the Yardbirds, when the first offer was made?
I was approached, actually after the Sonny Boy Williamson sessions, by Giorgio Gomelski, the manager, and he said that Eric was giving problems, and he didn't want to do this and he didn't want to do that, and would I join the Yardbirds? Would I, replace him? And I didn't want to be part of anything like that. In other words, they were trying an underhand move, stab in the back, and I didn't want to do that.
Trying to kind of maneuver him out of the band.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't going to be the man to cut Eric's, stab Eric in the back. But basically it was because he didn't want to get that commercial. Apparently, that's what it was all about. But then it came to the point where Eric actually left and I was approached again. Well, this time now Eric's left, so you know it's free for you to join without any sort of conscience. And I said, no, I don't think so. But I know a man who you should really check out, and I think he'd be perfect for the band. And that, of course, was Jeff. So that was that.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
He heard a rumor once that there was supposed to be a live Yardbirds album that you were not happy with at all because of the sound quality.
Mm-hmm.
So you bought up all the copies and made sure that nobody...
Okay. The album we're referring to is Live at the Anderson Theatre. And Epic had said, would we consider a live recording? So we said, yeah, sure, sounds good. That sounds good. And they sent down their staff producer. His name was Manny Kellum. Well, bless his heart, it wasn't his fault. But he'd only been used to doing light orchestral music in the past. And here he is facing this whole problem of recording a band live on the stage, you know. And he just didn't know how to approach it. He didn't know what to do. He had one microphone on the drum kit. And it was obviously going to be a total failure. But the most important thing about it was that Keith Relf, it wasn't one of his good nights. And we had the power of artistic decision on this as to whether it, should, whether we let it go further on after that, because obviously you don't just let somebody record you live and let them put it out. You have an artistic decision on this. Well, now the whole point about it was that, all in all, it wasn't a good night. I mean, if they'd have done another night, it would have been fine. But at the time, I remember it was mainly because we all said that Keith, it wasn't a good night for Keith. Apart from the fact that it wasn't recorded properly either. Now, this chap said to us, we can perform miracles in the studio. You just don't know what can be done. Well, I thought, this is interesting, because I've probably had more studio experience than you have, my friend. But certainly with rock and roll, anyway. So he went away with these tapes, and we had a call, will you come and have a listen to them? Well, we went to have a listen to them, and all that he'd done to it was, whereas obviously people had been listening to what we were doing, he'd overdubbed these cheers that sounded like a corrida, a bullfight. And so halfway through Days of Confusion, which was nothing like what was really happening. It was just laughable, and we said, no, sorry, forget it, that's not coming out. But you see, once Led Zeppelin was around, and living, so to speak, and doing very well at that, suddenly Epic decided, you know what record companies are like, we all know the way it goes. Oh, look, we've got a tape with this chap on, Jimmy Page, so we'll put it out. So it went out, but it was immediately stopped. But that's, it's the old greedy people.
So you didn't have to go out and buy them already?
No, we just slapped an injunction on them. Yeah, pretty quickly.
The difference between the Yardbirds and Zeppelin doing the same number is like chalk and cheese. I guess it could be attributed to Keith Relf's inferior vocal. No, I'm not knocking Keith Relf's vocals. No, he was just saying that's his own personal opinion.
No, as long as we don't knock Keith Relf vocals at all. Mm-hmm. No. Has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is the fact that the Yardbirds was a perfect vehicle for a guitarist to be able to, because there were numbers where it's something which I continued into Zeppelin, where they used to call it freeform areas, which basically was improvisation. Well, once I was just the only guitarist there, and unfortunately there's very little that's you can hear where Jeff and I were in the band. There's just happenings 10 years time ago and Stroll on. There's very little, unfortunately. That would have made a good live album. But where I was just on my own, obviously where I had all this, these areas to sort of play and invent, I came up with a lot of my own passages and riffs, and consequently once they decided that they didn't want to go on anymore. And curious enough, the one thing that Keith Relf said when I was saying, well, surely we can try this, that or the other, he came out with quite a surprising statement actually. He said, actually the magic of the band went for me when Eric went. which I thought, well, I'm fighting a losing battle here, because I thought that Jeff Beck had done all the interesting work in between that time, you know. But, you know, that was that. But, however, no, it was a fact that we had, the musicians that we had in Led Zeppelin were more inventive, really, you know. So that's no slant on the Yardbirds at all, it's just that, you know.
Yeah. With the Yardbirds, you guys had already been doing Dazed and Confused.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess the concept of Zeppelin, the Zeppelin sound, was more or less existed at least in your mind, and you know, to a degree.
Well, as I said, I had a whole number of passages and riffs that I'd worked out, which were purely my own invention, and yes, I certainly knew what way to go with Led Zeppelin, but it wasn't just those parts of that was part of it. The most important part that sets us aside from any other band at that time is the use of the acoustic and the way that it was employed.
In Zeppelin?
Sure thing. The acoustic guitar
right.
and the way that it was employed. For instance, a good example for this, of what I'm talking about, and this is what I had planned in my mind before I'd even met Robert Plant, for instance. I had the arrangement for Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And I mean, that was totally revolutionary. No one had ever thought of doing something like that before, in that style. I actually heard that number on a Joan Baez LP, and if you ever heard it, you probably wouldn't think it was the same thing at all. I thought it's a traditional number at the time. And just employing, you know, the light and shade, the drama, the way that the actual electric parts come in with the drums. I mean, nobody had ever thought of anything like this before. So that was all part of it, but, you know, so there was the use of the acoustic, and also the, for instance, the folk roots are most important as well, because Black Mountain Side, in fact, is an Irish melody, which again was a traditional song, and but to use that with like tabla drums, of course, this is something which is a bit unusual, but it was this having a complete, you know, sort of cycle of music, many dimensions of it, from blues, rock, the experimental side where you've got like within Dazed and Confused the bowing of the guitar, etc. And I you know, that's the way that I wanted the band to be.
Mm-hmm.
From the start.
The original seeds of like innovation, though.
It's all on the first album. It's all there. I mean, all of it. You know, it's just that they're there. From there, you see the way that it grows and matures.
Mm-hmm. This is a question that emanates from your mention of the use of the acoustic guitar, but you've always shown a great respect for Pentangle.
Well, not necessarily Pentangle, but Bert Jansch, yeah, sure thing, yeah.
The question was, have you always liked like traditional acoustic music from when you were, say...
Well, certainly that type of acoustic music, yeah.
Meaning with...
Well, Bert Jansch's style of playing and finger picking, yeah.
From like
as opposed to just strumming, yeah, finger picking and movement. In fact, I went to see Bert Jansch play once, and he does all this sort of bending string stuff on the records, and he didn't even have his own guitar. This chap didn't have his own guitar. He just borrowed a gut-strung guitar for the night, and he was still bending all the strings. It sounded exactly the same. And watching him play was like watching Julian Bream. He was having all these sort of like Bach inversions. What
does he have that Bream doesn't? Why would you say prefer Jansch to Bream?
I'm not saying I prefer. I was saying watching him was like watching a classical player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in his approach,
right,
and the way that he fingered the guitar. You know, at the time I was quite impressed with that. It was quite an influence on me, actually.
Getting back to the question, how old were you when you first got into that sort of acoustical traditional stuff?
Well, I picked up the guitar at 13, and it took me quite a while to become acquainted with all these different people. I guess, I know I was doing studio work anyway. Or was I maybe I was at art college? I might have been at art college, I don't know.
Well, it was long before that, though.
Oh, Lord, yeah. Yeah, 17, 18. And acoustic guitarist I was listening to, I might add.
Who else?
Lorindo Almeida, who is sort of classical and jazz as well. you know, I was devouring every kind of guitar style that I could get.
I said that the first album was very innovative because
Howling Wolf,
Right,
it's
okay.
called Meet Me in the Bottom,
uh
is also, I mean, you know, there's just as many,
the point there is that you seem to that seemed to break new ground.
it probably did.
Drinking Muddy Water.
Well, it probably did.
Thinking back in retrospect.
Yeah, in those days, yeah, that's right. Once, you know, I was actually recording stuff that I was being involved in writing, yeah. But I think even, you know, with Zeppelin, our approach to the blues was, even, you know, it wasn't just leaning on the traditional sort of, like a whisper the next within the same song, you know, light and shade.
I see. Okay.
So maybe more light and shade.
Perspective.
Certainly, yeah, and the dramatic quality as well.
Yeah, so, do you think you were more flexible with the blues than, say, Clapton and Beck were, whereas they tended to put it up on a pedestal and deify the
Well,
musicians?
for a start, you see Eric, especially in the days of John Mayall, where he actually made his reputation as a blues player, was actually digesting all these different players like Freddie King, B.B. King, etc., 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 and actually playing those phrases, linking them all up together. Whereas I was more intent in coming up with my own phrasing for blues and my own approach to playing it, just in the same way as with the riffs. I mean, I always came up with original riffs purely through, you know, just searching.
Do you think that those, like Clapton...
But they put them on the pedestal.
Yeah, whereas you were a little more flexible, you thought, well, it's just one style, and you sort of... a lot of white guitar players will cite Beck and Clapton and yourself, you know, the great guitar triumvirate in the 60s and 70s as major influences. But he seems to think that you were sort of a bit different in your approach to the blues, different from Clapton and Beck, that is. And he cites the example of Drinking Muddy Waters from the Little Dreams.
Drinking Muddy Water, yeah.
Drinking Muddy Water from
Yeah, which is, as he's saying, is rolling and tumbling
Right, exactly.
roots, but just in so much as that is Howling Wolf's Meet Me in the Bottom, is also emulating what there was before. It was taking it onwards into another dimension. Yeah.
But thinking back in retrospect, like, what do you think you did to the blues?
Purely what I just said then, just taking it into another dimension.
That dimension being...
Something that hadn't been done before.
Did you just make it louder and harder? Or
No, I wouldn't say louder.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more intense. I wouldn't say louder, because the whole thing about Zeppelin was that it could be, you know, like thunder one moment and